Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Virtual Coffee with Francois. I'm your host, Francois, and it's my privilege to welcome you back. Really excited about today's guest. We've got Douglas Kruger with us this morning, and you are going to be blown away. If you haven't had the privilege to listen to him and to share in the ideas and the thoughts and all the wisdom that he brings to the table, then you're really in for a treat this morning. So thank you very much for deciding to spend this Friday morning with us. And I am, as I said, overly excited to do this. Today is 8 weeks. Wow, hey, 56 episodes. We've started skipping Sundays. So last week, Sunday was the first day that I skipped. Otherwise, we were doing this consecutively. So we are now live from Monday to Saturday. And then on Sunday, I'm taking a little bit of a break. But yeah, this is the 56th episode. So it's 8 weeks since we started. Still going strong. Lots of ideas for the show and things that we want to do. Thank you very much for being on this journey with me. I really appreciate it. And for being with us again this morning live. I always appreciate when people can attend live because it's a different experience. But if you're watching the recording, thank you very much for that as well. I value just as much. And, I hope that we can see you in a live session somewhere in the future because we are not going to stop very soon. I just want to quickly run through the good mornings this morning before I introduce Douglas to you. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I just quickly want to shout out to Slanganani and Kobus Klein, Casper and Terence, Raymond, Stephen. It's so nice when I get messages in the evening to say they can't wait for tomorrow and we'll see you tomorrow and all that kind of stuff. It's really amazing. Denise, we've got there, and Malcolm, Almin, Arun, Raymond, Razan, Golf and Fear, and I really enjoyed your son's video, by the way. It's amazing. It was so well done to him, to have made that decision, and what he's been accomplishing through all the exercise and everything has been fantastic. So please say to him that I say well done. Then I've got Renee and Tines, Subash, welcome back. And then Kevin has asked me some questions on WhatsApp this morning. So in between everything, I'm answering WhatsApps as well. Nadia, first time I've seen you here. Thank you very much for joining us. Good morning. Let me put your name there on the screen. Very nice to have you with us. Chad, good morning. Douglas, Mark, Dimitriadis, Wayne, my friend, good morning. Welcome back. Nice to have you here. And a happy 8 weeks. Yes, thank you very much, Wayne. I appreciate it. Bongi, Hazel, welcome back, Hazel. Mark, Dunbar, Chris Roo. Good morning, Chris. Lekker om jou hier so te hê, my maat. Jaco Roots. Jaco is saying your show is amazing and helping me to grow a lot over the last of the 6 shows. Thanks to everybody involved. Yes, thank you very much. There's actually a lot of people involved in this. I may be delivering this, but there's a lot of people supporting and helping and doing all sorts of stuff to make a lot of things happen. And I'm very grateful for all of them. Tony Ensland, good morning. It's the first time I've seen you here. And Devin, good morning. Thank you. I saw that you subscribed to the channel this morning. Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate it. And let me hop on over to my friends on LinkedIn. And these are all on YouTube. So let me just see. I hope that my streaming software will soon be able to integrate with all the things on LinkedIn. But there we've got Peter Lopez. Good morning, Peter. And Hichu Hanley Hatting. Hanley, it's the first time I've seen you here. Welcome. Then we've got Frans. Welcome, Frans. Stefan, Grant back. Thank you, Grant. And Renata, good morning. So, yeah, that's it. Let's get cracking. And let me just make sure I've got everything off the screen that needs to be off. Guys, I'm really, really excited to be chatting to Douglas this morning. He is extremely busy and he is really, really sought after. He's written a book that's very topical at the moment. And there's so many things happening in his life. So I'm very, very grateful for him to be here this morning. But, before I bring him onto the screen and introduce him to you, I just want to remind you, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us grow and also obviously reach more people. So if you can please do that. If you're over on LinkedIn, you prefer LinkedIn, please connect with me. And if you're on YouTube, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn and do both. That'll be fantastic. And then please give this stream some love so everybody know that Douglas is with us and that, we're busy talking about some interesting things over here. And then obviously interact and chat with one another. And you're more than welcome to post any questions that you may have for Douglas. As usual, I get to them at the end of the discussion. But please do post them. I'll come back to them and answer all of that for you, or let Douglas rather answer all of that for you. And with that, so let me just do a brief introduction. Now, the first time ever that I heard Douglas speak was at the Pretoria Country Club. It was a stand-up event, And, I found this was amazing. So I found myself there with a key in my hand, and that key was to the latest and greatest and top of the range BMW. When I press a button, all the lights come on. It looks like the Starship Enterprise. I walk to the car as I open it. Expensive air escaped. It was just amazing. And a whole load of other things happened, but it was like I was there. And that was my first Douglas Kruger experience. So that is how, that was his intro. I mean, he stepped onto the stage. He doesn't say hello and this. He just starts off with, and then that voice hits you. And you hear in a second what I'm talking about. But Douglas is also a certified speaking professional. It's the highest designation, as far as I understand, that you can have as a speaker. And it is awarded by the National Speakers Association. And only 17%, 17% of the speakers in the world actually holds this designation. And to have somebody from South Africa, makes it even more special for that. But I mean, it just shows you to the class that Douglas is and the way that he conducts himself. Then also in 2016, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame by the Professional Speakers Association. He's also written 8 books. I don't know where he gets all the time, but he's written 8 books, and these books have been about business and wealth, and also now obviously about positioning. Well, initially also about positioning yourself as an expert. His most latest book he's written in a week. Took him a week to write this, and I really want to get into it with him about that entire process. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Douglas Kruger to our show this morning. Douglas, thank you very much for joining us and for taking the time.
Well, Francois, thank you so much for having me. And I mean, that was such a flattering introduction. I've got to say, that was exactly the way I sent it to you on email. So word perfect.
Yes, exactly, of course.
You remember the BMW story?
Yes, because later it became the S-Class Mercedes. Yeah,
yes,
and then,
it evolved over time.
Yes. But at that point, it was a BMW. I can't remember which. I just know it was top of the range, and there was lights and Starship Enterprises, and it was amazing. Yeah. So no, it's funny, Douglas, how things like that would stuck in my memory, because I hear a lot of people speak, and you go to a lot of events and things, and it's nice, but things don't always stick in your mind, So it was really special that day for me.
Well, and I really appreciate it. And
so
great
it's
to be here. You mentioned it's Friday. Do you know that I'd forgotten? I mean, it's starting to feel like sort of May-Tobuary, and Friday. Hey, excellent. That means it's weekend tomorrow.
Exactly. And it's just like, what day is it? It's day.
It's day. Yes, the sun's up.
Yeah, it's day. Exactly. Douglas, there's one question I want to ask you on a lighter note before I get into this whole show.
Yeah.
And that is, I've always wanted to ask you this, is like, do you sound like this when you speak to your wife and to Mikey at home? Is that your normal voice? Is this your show voice?
Up until about the age of 11, I spoke with a lisp and a very high-pitched voice. But no, my dad sounds this way, and so do I. I will say this, I have to some extent worked on the voice as a result of a small amount of radio broadcasting and so forth. But no, this is how I sound. So welcome.
You are blessed.
And I get you some coffee.
You are very blessed with that, and it's great to see you using that talent, for the good of the world. So it's really, really amazing. But anyway, so let me get into. I want to start off with the book itself. So this is called Virus Proof Your Small Business. How to survive. It's actually 50 ideas of how you can survive the COVID pandemic and get out the other side. I mean, what is how did this book come about? Where did it come from? How did it start?
Yeah.
What has that journey been?
Well, it was the most amazing thing. As we went into lockdown, I received an email from Penguin, from the business editor, and it was deceptively simple in its wording. She simply asked, would you be in the market to write a book on how small businesses can survive the COVID-19 crisis? And the real kicker was the next sentence. She said, but here's the catch. It has to be done in 10 days flat. And I tried not to think about that for too long. I simply wrote the word yes, hit respond, and then said a prayer and realized the scale of the mountain that I was about to climb. But in fact, we actually got the entire thing done between 2 Wednesdays. So from one Wednesday to another, the entire manuscript. Now, having said that, there were a few things that made it easier for me. I was inundated with ideas from around the world. I simply put it out there and I said, if you've seen a principle or a practice that is keeping entrepreneurs in business, keeping doors open, please share it with me. And the response to that was so generous, it was actually awe-inspiring. I received input from places like Croatia, Texas, Israel, Australia, New Zealand, literally all around the world. And then my task became to sift through this barrage of emails and turn it into useful principles. So that certainly made my life a little easier. And the wonderful thing about this, and it's unusual for a South African book, is that once it was completed, the editors sent it to Penguin in the UK. And they said, would you like to use this manuscript? And within literally a couple of hours, they had responded with a yes, and they then subsequently published it globally. So this is one of the very few South African business books that's actually gone global. I'm told that you can walk into a bookstore in Romania and pick one up. So
wow. Okay.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
And is it going to be translated into the different languages? Is it only available in English?
Well, yes, what they've done first is they've done the English version now. And funny that you should ask that. I went onto a Spanish website the other day where they were selling the book, and you see the whole write-up in Spanish, but it mentions that the book itself is in English. So for now, it's English, but the theory is it will be translated into major languages like French and Spanish.
Yes. And what is the whole point of the book, Douglas? What is it about? What are we trying to achieve with this book?
Well, it's as simple as this. You've seen the little memes, and I mean, people sort of make fun of this, and I get the humor as well. You see a little astronaut standing on the moon, and the world is exploding, and he says, OMG, the economy. And of course, what people are pointing at there is they're saying that an economy is not as important as human survival. Well, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is an economy is human survival. It's how we feed our children. It's how we maintain our livelihoods. You can't actually, they're inextricably bound. You can't take one away from the other and expect humanity to survive. I actually saw someone post the other day saying, well, we don't really need money. We just need human survival. I think you'll find it's very tricky to do one without the other. So it's as simple as this. I want businesses to survive. We are in a situation now where the more businesses survive, the more businesses survive. It's almost a game of mutual survival. Every business that keeps its door open entails another business that keeps its door open. Yeah. And I think it's especially in places like South Africa, where we have something like, I believe the last stat was around 25 people dependent on each tax-paying individual. We can't afford to be closing businesses. Our bigger problem is going to become starvation. So the book hopes to and aims to contribute towards solving that problem.
Okay, that's great. And then one of the main points of the book, you said, is that it's profitability over costs.
Yeah. Okay.
So often you will hear people say, like, people over profits and those kind of things. But what do you mean exactly with profitability over costs?
Okay, so basically all business survival entails that simple formula, which is profitability over cost. It applies at any point in time, but it becomes even more important now when we're facing constraints and difficulties and a lack of resource. Profitability over cost is really just a fancy way of saying exactly what Robert Kiyosaki says in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where he says, how do you tell if you're getting richer? Well, if more is coming in than going out, you are getting richer. If more is going out than coming in, you are getting poorer. Now, the reason that particular formula becomes important for us now is that the temptation is to focus solely on the far side of that equation, on the end of the sentence, which is to say people very naturally go into conserve mode, into shrink mode, into retain mode. And it does matter that you conserve, but it's only half of the survival equation. If you're only focusing on that part of the equation, it is entirely possible to conserve your way into redundancy, to save your way into the grave. It just entails a slower death. We need both. We need the profitability on the one side and the conservation on the other. So that formula then sets up the 50 ways in the book. And the 50 ways then focus on both sides, how to get money in and how to keep the money that you do get in, all of which goes then toward business survival. That's the core formula.
Okay. And I mean, this is one of the questions now, is like, all your books are sort of structured in that way, 50 ideas, 50 ways. I know I got I think it was actually maybe your first audiobook was 50 ways to make your point without PowerPoint, which was a book that I bought because I prefer listening to books rather than reading them.
Yeah,
but but it's always around these 50 ideas. Is there a reason or a formula, or why are all the books sort of structured in that way? Because I think
Yes,
all of your books are like that, or most of them.
An intellectual reason for that one is that I did it with the first one and it stuck.
Okay,
So
it works for you.
I will say, though, that it was a bit of a godsend in the sense that when it came to writing this one, there was a pre-existing formula in place, which also sped up the process. And it made it, I think, a better book in this particular scenario, in the sense that what you don't want is a single formula pass or fail. Many business books follow a sort of a single formula proposal, which stands the danger that it either works for you or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, I mean, and you're hinging your entire business upon it, that can be quite dangerous. This one is certainly not a single formula. It is simply 50 separate ideas. And I make the point right at the beginning where I say, there is no way that every idea here is going to work in your scenario. But instead, here is a buffet of ideas, and most of them will. So choose the ones that are right for you. And I think it just lent itself really beautifully to this particular crisis and this project.
Yeah. Okay. So and what I've done now is I've gone ahead and I've handpicked some of these things. So let's see how well I've balanced it out between some of the between the profitability and the other things that we need to do. So there's some of these ideas that I want to ask you about, Douglas, and that if you can obviously then just expand on that and what the core idea is around this, and that because our audience is primarily financial professionals. So I tried and looked at things that I think will, from my point of view, that will have a big impact on them. And it was interesting for me to see that a lot of the concepts that we discussed on the show up until now it comes through in these points that you're making. So very excited to get into it. So let's look at some virus proofing ideas of things. The first thing I want to ask you about is actually the very first idea that is in the book, and it says that you need to choose to fight for it. And I can't agree more with that. It's a choice. It's literally so.
And it's a hard choice, and it's a courageous choice. I think from what I've witnessed around me, I think most people have, instead of making the choice to fight for it, most people have gone with wait and see. And there is great danger to wait and see because you tend to be hemorrhaging capital as you go. You don't have the time to wait and see. You don't have the luxury. And also, once you get to the point where you realize that you don't have the luxury, by that stage, you should have been acting and preparing already. So the very first chapter says, listen, don't go with a passive approach that says wait and see. Make the call to fight for it. And I also point out that that applies regardless of the nature of your business. It doesn't matter whether your business is seemingly important or grand or has a sense of gravitas. Perhaps what you do for a living is you make kids' balloons for parties. It still matters that you fight for that business. On the one hand, it is your means of livelihood and income. And on the other hand, it is part of this building block, part of the foundations of not just our economy, but our entire civilization that rests on top of that. It matters that you choose to fight for it. After you've made the call, it also changes your energy. You go from that passive wait and see mode into something that says, all right, if I'm going to do this, how do I do this? And that switches to a more sort of creative mindset. You can even get a little philosophical on this one. There's a gentleman named Steven Pinker, who is a cognitive psychologist, and he has a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, in which he points to trade, simple free trade between human beings, as the greatest peacekeeping and civilization stabling force in our history. And I think he has quite a profound point there. It matters from various perspectives that you choose to fight for it. And then, of course, after making that call, the question becomes, what do you practically do? And that's what the rest of the book aims to look at.
Yes, and one of those points is actually you must decide what not to do.
Yes.
So it's about what to do and what not to do. So let's get into how do you decide what not to do?
Okay, so the underlying principle in that chapter is that you have constraints on your resources at any point in time. You have limits in terms of your own energy, your staff's energy, the amount of money you have to spend. There are limits to resources in any scenario. Now, what we're looking at here is a situation in which you're trying to achieve the same thing, but your limitations have grown. It is harder to do what you did before. So what you don't want to do is anything unnecessary. And there are various clever ways in which you can look at this one. The first one is to look at it on a simple procedural basis and say, all right, if we used to do the 10-step process, can we now do the 2 or 3-step process? And there's a lot of interesting value to conducting what we might call the laziness exercise. And that is to ask yourself, what's the least we could get away with? Now, as I say, that initially sounds like a lazy approach, as though you are shirking your responsibilities. But it actually turns out, if you really study innovation, this is often the golden ticket to clever ways of doing things. Take the simple example of the innovation of PayPal. PayPal is not a bank invention. Why not? Because banks tend to think with the baggage, the steps, the regulations, the processes inherent to banks. They've been carrying that with them for decades, for centuries. Along comes a lazy innovator and says, I couldn't be bothered with all that. I just want to achieve this. And by stripping away those steps, you innovate a brand new way forward. You can change the way in which you do business. So there's something sort of genius to that. Now, there's another way in which you can look at this technique as well, which is to ask the question, which regulations, which burdensome norms can we have dismissed or paused for now? My wife works in the financial services industry, so I'm familiar with this world. And she was telling me the story of one particular body that, as the lockdown began, sprang into action and demanded compliance from a set of their clients. And it was borderline malicious. It was totally capricious. It was unnecessary. It was arbitrary. It was as though they were doing it just for the sake of theater. And the interesting thing is, that wasn't necessary from any legal standpoint. They could actually have said, guys, we understand the kind of pressure you're under at the moment. Listen, we'll get back to you. Just carry on with your business. So this idea of asking what you're not going to do, you can even apply it to the norms, the rules, the regulations. You might approach a regulatory body and say, we need a little leeway. Can we have a pause on this set of compliance norms just for now? And they may not have thought of it.
Yeah. And there's quite a few things that happened from a few places, which I can say that has definitely also had an impact on people. Even where some advisors were able to still conclude business because of certain regulations and rules that were put in place, they were not able to get those things through and actually earn an income from it.
And let me ask you this question: how does that stop a virus?
Yeah, that's a good question. It may create a new one, but yeah. So one of the other ideas that you also included in the book was arrange for temporary lifestyle changes for your people, and I think if we say for your people, I mean it's for yourself as well. It is for your staff. Maybe it is having a conversation with clients to say, what have you considered doing this to make things easier for you? Yeah. And I mean that is something that actually fits slap bam in the middle. Like it fits in nicely with what it is that financial advisors do. So tell me a little bit more about that, Douglas. What kind of lifestyle changes can we look at?
Great. Well, some of the more simple ones are, we're now spending our entire lives in Zoom webinars. So you do need to negotiate how you're going to go ahead and handle that. And there are simple tips in the book about, say, overlapping hours. For instance, if you have to meet online every day, it is not necessary that you dedicate the whole day to it. You can be exceptionally productive with a 3 to 4 hour overlap, which is to say you might decide that between 10 in the morning and 12 or 1 in the afternoon, that's your overlap period when people must be available for Zoom meetings. And beyond that, you say, well, leave it till tomorrow. Let people have their time back. It's also interesting to zoom further back and ask a very basic question. Do you need to have meetings at all? Research for over the past 50 years has indicated that meetings are the #1 destroyer of productivity. And the temptation right now is to have these Zoom webinars in order to reassure ourselves, in order to feel this theater of togetherness. It may not be a smart idea. It could actually be adding further limitations on your resources when you don't need them. So the starting question is actually to ask, do we have to have these meetings at all? If you can simply let your staff get on with it, please do. And then, of course, you have to address the psychology of the leadership team. It is immensely difficult to let go and simply judge people on their outcomes. And yet here's an interesting thought. If you are judging people by the perceived busyness because you can see them, they're able to fool you. But if you're only able to judge people by outcomes, they simply have to meet the outcomes. There's something cleaner about managing that way, but you do have to let go. Now, in the book, I ask the simple question, do you need meetings or do you not need them? If you don't need them, let your people go, let them get on with it. Then I go into the idea that if you do need strategic meetings with your leadership teams, there is a wonderful formula to follow from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. And they are emulated by agile organizations all around the world, the likes of sort of the Pixars and so forth. And they do a very simple thing at the end of every day. Regardless of conflict on the field, regardless of the outcome of battle, whatever the case might be, regardless of how tired they are, they hold these meetings in which they ask 3 questions. What went well? What went badly? How do we do better tomorrow? And it becomes this sort of chaotic debate in which people from the lowest rank to the highest rank are able to really have a go at each other and to hash out what's going well, what's not working, how to do better tomorrow. The point of this is to create what they call total situational awareness. They want people from the lowest to the highest ranks to have a clear picture of what's going right, what's going wrong, how they can compensate. And they want the ideas to flow as broadly as possible. So I go into a little bit of detail in the book in terms of how you can do that. And again, just sort of ways of negotiating, working online and working remotely. Probably the simplest but most profound tip is, if it doesn't have to be a meeting, don't make it one. Call people, WhatsApp people, send an email, let them get on with their work.
Yes, I recently did a program for our professional body as well, particularly on where, what the world of work may be like after we go back to whatever we're going back to. And one of the things I also said, there will also, apart from this thing about being, should we have a meeting or not, the second part to that will probably be, should this meeting take place face to face? Versus in the past, it was, can't we do this online? Now it's going to be, should we do this face to face? Probably.
Yes. Yeah.
But one of the biggest concerns is that we are going to get virtual burnout, because now suddenly it's back-to-back meetings. I mean, and I always joke with my corporate friends to say, well, you are the best paid meeting attender that I've ever met in my life, because if you look for them, they are in a meeting.
Absolutely.
And now it's even worse. It's worse with the online stuff, because it's back-to-back. There is no time to walk from one meeting room to another meeting room or anything like that. So I think there's a huge danger in that as well. And one of the other things that you mentioned in the book, or one of the other ideas, and you've alluded to this now already, it's amazing how, as we talk, like you sort of, take me into my next question, because we didn't prepare this before the time, is basically, and this is what I want everybody to know how amazing this is, because I did not send my questions to Douglas before the time. I mean, this is how amazing it is to just ask questions, and it's just, the ideas are just coming, and it's really amazing, Douglas. So thank you very much for that. The next question that I have is, like, how do we work smarter remotely? And also, there's this notion that there's a big difference between working remotely and working from home, because although working from home is working remotely, but that isn't always going to be the case going forward. And for now, it's I mean, I've seen numerous videos with you and Mikey on the what do you call, on the trampoline. It's how things go now. No more green screen and all these fancy stuff. It's like, this is life, guys.
You work around and you do what you can. Yes, and I think the wonderful thing about it is South Africans have stopped having to apologize for the 3-year-old making dinosaur noises in the background, because it's happening to all of us. But there are some very simple but very useful tips in terms of home work and productivity. The first one comes from a book called I forget the title, but it's about these sort of 90-minute chunks of work. And it goes into immense amounts of detail on the research and comes to a very simple conclusion, which is that the human brain functions very well in 90-minute chunks. If you have large amounts of work to get done, ideally what you want to do is close the door for a 90-minute period, focus on just that, open it at the end of the 90-minute period, take a break, get a cup of coffee, and repeat. And there are simple things you can do as well to avoid this kind of feeling of, which month are we in? It's October, Mayuary, the 11th, which is to divide your day up intentionally into segments. It imposes a certain order and discipline that is just eminently lacking at the moment. And that might go, right, 9 to 10 o'clock, that's email time. 10 to 11 o'clock is exercise time. 11 to 12 is. And simply by following that, it gives you a bit of a reassuring routine. Simple psychology around the idea that just changing venues every now and again is a very, very good, healthy idea. So if you're working in a small cubbyhole of an office, why not spend the afternoon outside? Morning is in the office, afternoon is outside on the lawn under a tree. Just changing venues can actually help with your own mental health. And there are many things we can do from our own perspective. Then there are things we can look at in terms of outbound communication and so forth. For example, you mentioned the fatigue around meetings. Well, I think the next thing that we're suffering fatigue around is thought leadership emails. Now, there is certainly something to be said for positioning yourself as a thought leader now. And that's a topic I'm very big on. However, if you're sending out emails that say COVID-19 update, well, that's going into my inbox alongside 49 other ones with the same headline that morning, and I'm not reading them anymore. So it does mean that you really have to rethink how you're connecting with the public, how you are going about your thought leadership. And the simple key to this one is it's got to be entertaining. It's got to be short, sharp, and succinct. You're going to do a lot better with 3 ways to, and just launch straight into information. But ideally, if you could do something visual and entertaining, you might actually get through right now. And that makes the world of difference.
Yeah, those are some powerful tips that I'm definitely gonna implement some of those, because even now when I'm writing emails to let people know, like you going to be on the show and the next person, I'm wondering, and I'm looking at the email open rates, they've gone down from what it was before all of this.
Absolutely.
It's like, so how do we still catch attention? Because even in my world, I've created so many rules that's taking just the normal stuff to the newsletter thing. And so at least what I've done is I've split it between important stuff and just the normal stuff, so that it does still automatically go there. So unless I take time to go and look at it, and I think a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah.
So as you say, you've got to stand out with this. So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into this. One of the other ideas is also that you got to look at what is the core of your business. And this is something I've also been talking about several times, to say, well, what is it that you really do? What is it that you are really about? And also your role in your business. What is the core of that? So apart from what is the business's core, what is your core? Because we tend to get busy with things that's not productive and it's not really helping.
Yes.
What are some of the things we need to consider?
Okay, this I think is the most fascinating part of the book. When you ask yourself what is the core value underpinning what you do, you discover that you can actually end up doing business in completely different ways. I'll give you a strange but powerful example of this one. If you are a gym, there is not terribly much you can do right now. You would believe that you are location dependent and you are attendance dependent. And yet, the venue itself is still not the core value. The core value is the idea of physical health, muscle building, hypertrophy, and so forth. And there's a gentleman out of the UK. In fact, there are quite a few people doing this right now, but I pick on him, who does bodybuilding at home videos. And the last time I checked on his channel, he had one video on how to work your chest and your biceps muscles that had 25 million views over the course of just a couple of weeks. Yeah. Now, if you're familiar with YouTube and the monetization process and so forth, you would know that having 25 million views is like an annual income. I mean, that is substantial money. So even the idea that you are a gym and cannot do anything is not necessarily true. There are other ways of monetizing that core value. And there are alternative ways of even thinking about the problem. I think of, for example, the famous example of Pixar. They thought of themselves as a computer parts and program company. That's what they sold initially. Then they eventually discovered that actually where their real revenue lay was in doing animation, and they became the Pixar we know today. The thought exercise for this one goes like this. Imagine that you've inherited a stony plot of land. It's arid, it's dry, it's nothing but rock as far as the eye can see. You've spent 20 years trying to farm unsuccessfully. What if you should be a quarry owner instead? So what resources do you have in great abundance that can be repurposed in a different direction? Could that be your staff's know-how, technical skills that can be used in an entirely different way? Could that be physical or infrastructural? Could that be something that you do that can be repurposed, re-angled, and changed in a different way? And one way of thinking about this one, and the reason I give you this example is that is almost too blue skies and white page. We stop and we go, well, where do I even start thinking about that? Here's one clever way. Ask the question, what do my customers need right now? Now, that's not the same thing as asking, what did I previously sell to these customers, or how did I previously serve them? Put that aside. look at your customers and say, what do they need? And can you serve them with that in this interim period? And that becomes a very clever way of reaching the same people, serving the same market, but doing it differently. You could spend a day thinking about just that one question alone. But yes, it becomes this question of asking, what's the core value and how do you activate that differently?
Yes. And I mean, some of us do have excess time, or maybe all of us have got excess time if you're not in those Zoom meetings all the time, or Microsoft Teams meetings back to back. But it's critical for us to use that time, to sort of think about strategy and see, from that point of view, like how can we take advantage of this and how can we reposition ourselves? But how can we use our time most effectively to get to that? Because you do tend to get into this whole situation around, I'm not sure exactly what to do.
Yeah.
And some people just go into, as you said, let's just wait and see if this is going to change.
Yes.
Are there some things that we can do in order to make maximum use of our time, to take that advantage from a strategy point of view?
Yeah, and this is why the first chapter really bangs on about that idea, make the decision to fight for it. I have a friend within my industry who works in the sort of the leadership space, and he was working on a book. And as the crisis hit, he stopped working on the book. And the reason offered was, well, everything is so uncertain right now. When you think about it, that makes no sense. How does that serve you? So from the position of, or from the perspective of positioning yourself as an expert, there are always things you can do, and really now is the time to do it. When I speak on expert positioning, I always say it's this idea of becoming the Schwarzenegger of bodybuilding, the Branson of business, the Clarkson of cars, the Nigella Lawson of food. And there are specific things that these individuals do differently. Very often their notoriety within an industry is based on something like writing the book. Can you write the book? Is based on something like hosting the television show. Could you propose a TV show to a channel, to a station right now? If not, why not? Could you do the simple version of that? Could you do the YouTube broadcast or whatever the case might be? You want to be asking yourself, what are these cornerstone credibility creating foundations that can make you the industry expert? Now is the time to work on that. And worth throwing into that mix, there is a formula at the heart of expert positioning, which says that these icons, these experts, exist at the intersection of three qualities. It is the knowledge, the personality, and the publicity. Most people get stuck on number one, which is the knowledge. They assume that if you've got the technical qualification, that is sufficient. In many industries, that is entrance into the game, and you have to have it. In some industries, you don't even have to have the technical qualification. When we talk about this first one, it's the competence, the know-how, the knowledge. But that is only one part of it. The personality is a big driver as well. And here is where we get someone like a Nigella Lawson standing out from a field, a massive field of people who know how to prepare food. A Jeremy Clarkson standing out from a massive field of motoring journalists and so forth. Knowledge, personality, and publicity. So those three things come together. And when you think around that formula, you can then start to prepare proactive ways of positioning yourself for future success. Now, that's just for the individual. For the brand right now, you might be asking questions like, are my competitors looking at exiting the game? Could I buy them up? Could I consolidate? Could I be the big source, the go-to source when this turns around, when this changes? And it has to change. And the reason that I say that is the needs, the fundamental human needs underpinning our businesses have not disappeared. They are merely on hold. And in certain cases, they are backing up, and there is a tidal wave of business coming. And I think, for example, of the world of hairdressers, they can't operate right now. It's illegal. But it's not like the need for hairdressers has gone away. I'm trying to tell myself that I have a Simon Baker, the mentalist thing going on. I probably look more like sort of Art Garfunkel on a bad day at the beach. But the need hasn't gone away. It's coming back, and it's coming back in a hurry.
Yes, and just looking at this, we're almost looking the same, I must say. So we have the same problem. But yeah, we'll see. I'm going to let my wife loose on my hair on Saturday, so we'll see how that goes.
I'm still debating that one.
Yes, look, I've held off for a very long time, right? But I think the time has come where I can only take so much. I'm open to taking that risk, so it's fine.
Right.
All right. So with that, I think that's a nice interlude. Let's move on over to expert positioning and what
Yeah.
we can do, particularly during this time. So also if we now look at what you would normally do to position yourself as an expert, and sort of bring that into the current circumstances,
Yeah.
which are the things, and I love that you said this about it's the knowledge, the personality, and the publicity, because I think often people, they have the knowledge, they even have the personality, but when it comes to the publicity, they say, no, I don't want to be on camera, I don't want to be on radio, I don't want to be TV, and they think
Yes.
that's the only kind of publicity that they can get.
Yeah.
So I really want to expand on sort of that idea. And again, that book, the first idea from your book, Owning Your Industry, is that, you got to start with greatness in mind. And I think that is where that speech of yours, that talk, not that speech, but that talk of yours, that you started off to say, well, it's 2 years from now. You walk out of this interview, there you go.
What is
you press
your
the
reality?
button, there's the car.
Yeah.
This is it. So you paint that future picture, but it's because you made a decision today.
Yes.
And I think that is where that, so why is it so important? And again, it's funny to me that for Virus Proof, you've got to decide to fight for it. So it starts with the decision. And to position yourself as an expert, it starts with a decision. You've got to start with greatness in mind.
Yes, and I think of it as kind of walking out into the mist intentionally. And I think that's quite a good metaphor for it, because there are no road signs along the way in assuring you that you're on the right track. You have to choose to walk out into that mist boldly, because nobody else does it for you. Positioning yourself as an expert and icon in an industry is an act of courage, and it is not there's no compulsion on you to do it. No one tells you to, no one forces you to, no one volunteers you. You've got to stick up your hand, volunteer yourself, and start that journey. Now let's just pick on the fear aspect there that you alluded to. I mentioned Jeremy Clarkson as the Clarkson of cars. Now that is a big, bold, brash personality. That's a very over-the-top, loud man. I mean, we might even talk about like the Donald Trump of hotels or presidency. And there again, I mean, it worked. But you may not be a big, bold, brash, over-the-top personality. Perhaps you're a shy, introverted, retiring type. Let me give you then the example from Nigella Lawson's industry of Jamie Oliver. Jamie Oliver is a quiet, down-to-earth, pretty sort of authentic, bloke next door kind of guy. But the difference here is we know his face, we know his voice, we are familiar with his brand. He is not a big, loud, brash person. He's a very quiet, real person. That might be you. The key is you've got to take that quiet, humble, real person, and show it to the world. And that does take courage, and there's simply no getting around that one. Jamie Oliver has an accolade, which was when he released one of his Christmas cookbooks. It became the fastest selling book of all time in all of human history. So, I mean, that's just the most astonishing thing. So it just does go to show that you don't have to have the loudness, the brashness, but you do have to have the personality. Now, a thought to consider. Most people on earth are terrified of public speaking. Whenever they do surveys and they ask people, what is your number one fear? It's not uncommon that death comes second. Public speaking tops that list. And of course, what that teaches us is that at your average funeral, most people would rather be the guy in the box than the one delivering the eulogy. But that also points to something useful, which is if everyone is terrified of doing it, but you choose to do it, you have already set yourself apart from most people within your industry and most people in the world. Interestingly, Forbes magazine listed public speaking and presentation skills as the number one soft skill to master in order to get ahead in your career, to earn more, to position yourself for success. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be up on big stages speaking. It means you are mastering the skills of communication, of making ideas come alive. You might do it to a camera in your lounge, and that could be good enough, but you do have to do it, and it's a choice.
Yes, it's exactly what I wanted to add on to that, is to say, you know what, you may use this in your career, within your company. It's not to say that you're going to be, all over the world or something like that, but it's actually about
internal within your business, and that's every bit as powerful. Yeah.
Yes, it's about the communication and being able to to transfer an idea over to somebody, and to
Yes.
persuade people to consider that idea.
Yes. And in fact,
So
Francois,
that,
if you don't mind me just butting in
yeah,
there,
please.
one great book to read on that. I mentioned him earlier, Steven Pinker. Get hold of the book The Sense of Style, which is basically like the logic of style. You don't even have to read the whole book. Read the first 50 pages, and I'll give you the key learning from this one. He says that the human mind is perfectly able to understand numbers, charts, graphs, abstract representation, but it doesn't light us up. It doesn't make us come alive. What does light us up is moving imagery in the imagination. Now, when you did the intro, you mentioned a story that I told from a few years ago that I've kind of forgotten myself, about you walk out, you sit in this BMW, this is what happens to you. That's what makes people come alive. So if you can tell stories that make your points come to life, so much more powerful. And even better than that, tell them using the audience, whether it's a viewing or a reading audience, as the main character. Picture yourself 3 years from today. It's irresistible in terms of making ideas come alive. Jeremy Clarkson, for all his buffoonery, speaks in these little picture stories. He uses metaphors. He says, it's like. One of his famous ones, he says something down the lines of, your average supercar is like trying to wrestle an elephant up a loft, but this one is like rubbing honey into Keira Knightley. Now, talk about making an idea come alive with visuals. You're never going to forget that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's brilliant. So you also talk about becoming a category of one.
Yeah.
What is that all about? And how do we, how can you start to take steps to actually do that? Because that's very intriguing to me.
Yes. So there's a speaker and author in the States by the name of Joe Calloway, and this is his phrase, this idea of becoming a category of one. He has a book, in fact, with that title, Becoming a Category of One. And the whole concept, it's very similar to Seth Godin's Purple Cow. It's this idea that most people who enter an industry have this very human insecurity that causes them to look around at everyone else and say, what is it like in this industry? What is the prevailing tone? And then in order to feel legitimate, to copy the tone and try to fit in. Well, if you do that, you will look like the rest of the industry, and that can be good enough for credibility. It takes courage to look at the industry tone and say, I'm going to stand out by design. I'm going to create this purple cow. I'm going to become a category of one where there is nothing else quite like me. So once again, that is a courage decision. And once you've made that decision, you can then get creative with it. Having decided to stand out on purpose, you then say, all right, what am I going to do that is totally different to the rest of this industry? Instead of being like the motoring journalists of the 1970s who would politely review a car and talk about its colors and its engine sizes, can I be the Jeremy Clarkson who comes around and says, this is rubbish and here's why? He was the first one ever to do that. It was a shock to the entire industry. Now the industry emulates him. So it almost goes, what would be the courageous version of? Can you pioneer that and be the person who goes first?
Yeah, and what role does dress code play in all of this? It's something that I'm struggling with personally. There's sort of maybe in an industry like ours, that you dress in a particular way, and then there's sort of my other side to that. So because you can choose to either go down the same route and do that,
fit in or stand
I also
out.
believe. Yeah, but I also believe that one shouldn't necessarily try and be the opposite of what everybody else is doing, unless it's who you truly are.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's going to backfire on you. If you're just being different, just for the sake of being different, you can't sustain that.
You've hit the nail on the head. Yeah. In the book, the second one on expert positioning, what makes them great, I speak about this idea of dressing in iconic ways. And I make I spend half the chapter saying, I worry about this one because it does work. It is effective, but there is so much danger associated with it. And my worry is that people sort of take it to outlandish lengths where I say, stand out and be iconic. And the next thing you've got someone with, an eye patch and a parrot and a pipe. And how far does it go? But you find what tends to happen is in every industry, the icons simply have their own sense of style. So it's not outlandish, it's not garish, it's not ridiculous. But it becomes like, say, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. Let's pick on Steve Jobs there with the black turtleneck sweaters. Now, that is not a very dramatic decision, but it was his style choice. Possibly the most dramatic one has to be Hugh Hefner in the bathrobes and so on. And it worked. I mean, he was iconic for it. So I always think the way to look at this one is really just to sort of lean toward your personal sense of style, not to do things that are an affect, that are kind of outlandish or ridiculous.
Yeah, it's important because I think you find a lot of people, well, not a lot, but there are some people who just they want to be different and they want to do that. So I attended an event last year. It was I think it was October, November somewhere, and there was a guy. He's an accountant, but I mean usually when you meet an accountant, they almost fall, and I'd say this with respect, they may fall in the same category as actuaries and those kind of people. They're very serious, very focused on what they do, kind of thing. But what he did was, like, he is this expressive guy, and he's got these very bright suits. Okay. Like I'm telling you, like I mean, yellow and orange, and because it was a 2-day thing. Yeah. So it was amazing, but it suited his personality, because if you speak to him, his whole face, that's him. So that works. If I were to do that, I mean, like, they'd be like, where's this jumping castle coming from? But, so that's probably the thing. How can we constantly contribute to the media, Douglas? Because I mean is it easy to sort of get onto the media's radar and say, listen, I want to write articles, or maybe I'm open for interviews. What is that process like? And when do you need a book before you can do that? Or is there other options?
Surprisingly, it's actually easier than most people assume. I would basically say start at a low level and work your way up. So for instance, my very first business articles were written for the Star Workplace and not hard to get into that forum at the time. And then as a result of that, I went to Entrepreneur Magazine and so on and so forth. But having said that, to be perfectly honest, you can jump straight to the big forums if you have the chutzpah to simply do it. What they look for is value for their readers and value for their viewers. So let's say, for example, you had to approach a big source, perhaps a national broadcaster, SABC, a news show. It would be as simple as this. You need to establish your credibility and then offer something that is of perceived value. So you might go onto a specific show, look for the show on a website, look for that show's producer, email the producer directly and say, I have something that I believe would be of interest to your viewers. I understand from my experience in this industry that this is what they're struggling with right now. I believe that I have 3 answers to how they can solve that problem. Could I share that information with your viewers? Now, that is very different to a self-focus where you say, do you want to talk about me? And you're very rarely going to get a yes to that one. But if you're offering genuine value, it's actually surprisingly rare that you get a no to that offer, as long as it is relevant to that audience and it is a strong offer. Now, I'm going to add to that, once again, that sort of that pique the curiosity and add a little entertainment factor. If you can add a metaphor to it, you will make it come alive. So you might say, for example, South Africans are caught running on a hamster wheel right now. Here are the 3 things that most people are struggling with, and from my perspective within this industry, I have 3 solutions. May I share this information? It would be useful to the viewing public right now. A producer looking at that might say, well, come and chat with us about the hamster wheel. So it's that kind of thing. It's this mixture of useful thought leadership content and a way of making it come alive, making it interesting, making it intriguing. If you can put that together, I'd say 8 times out of 10, you're going to get a yes on this one.
Wow. And then something that's also very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and a lot of people are struggling with this, and then they're looking at this and is this thing about pricing yourself, right? We spoke about business models yesterday, and we've spoken about fees and all kinds of things in our industry before, but that's a hard thing about how do you relate price to value and value to price. But what impact does price or whatever you're charging your fees, or however you work, it doesn't really matter. But what is the implication or the impact of that on how people view you from an expert positioning point of view?
Yes, I'm going to be very honest with you here, Francois, and say that under the crisis situation, I don't know if this changes or not. In my speaking industry, we're still kind of grappling with this one. Ideas like, do we still charge full seminar fees if we're doing a Zoom webinar and so on? And some speakers say yes, some say no. So let me table that one for a second and say I'm not sure myself. However, under normal operating conditions, there is no doubt that the perceived link between cost and value is extreme. People who are not terribly familiar with an industry will shop based on price and will very rarely go for the cheapest option. There tends to be something perceived as being wrong with that. I'll give you again example from my industry here. Imagine someone in Dubai is setting up an event and they want to bring in a South African presenter, and the shall we say the PA presents them with three different examples, and they say, well, here are the three we've selected that speak on the topic of, let's call it, innovation. And you have one person who says, well, my fee for flying to Dubai is 50,000 Rand. The other says 45,000 Rand. And the third one says 8,000 Rand. The chances are very likely you're simply going to dismiss the 8,000 Rand one and look at the other two because it seems proportionately too cheap. And there's no doubt that if you want to become the Mercedes of your industry, cost is a very big factor in perceptions. Now, of course, there is an ethical attendant to that, which is you also have to be worth it. If you're going to be charging Mercedes fees, well, it had better come with the back massager. So you really do have to uphold those standards. And then you ask yourself specific questions about your own model, your own service, the degree to which you host and rescue your clients. Are you really the Mercedes of your industry?
Yes, and does it come with that seat warmer? That's very important.
Oh, you must try a heated steering wheel. That's cool.
Okay. I had that on my motorcycle when I still had a motorcycle. It had heated grip, so I've got some idea. But sometimes it gets too hot, so then you go like, gee, you're not sure. But
comes with all new Jags.
Yeah, like. Douglas, yeah, so I don't see any particular questions. A lot of people are echoing what you're saying and saying thank you, it's so valuable and all of that. So I'm not seeing any particular, there's been a lot of comments and people saying hello and so forth in the chat, but I'm not seeing any particular questions. If anybody does have a question for Douglas while you've got him here, please do ask. I also looked over on LinkedIn, same story over there. A lot of people are sharing some of their experiences and their things as well. So I can see that the people are getting a lot of value from this. Douglas, where can people actually get hold of Virus Proof? The book about virus proofing your small business, and then also obviously your other books, but particularly the Virus Proof one. Where can people get hold of that at the moment?
Okay, just to say, I'm glad to hear that people are sort of sharing their insights and ideas. The final chapter in the book, I make the point where I say, if it works, share it. We are dependent upon everyone else surviving. So if you try something, whether it's a productivity tip, a way of selling, a way of restructuring your business, and you have success with it, for heaven's sake, please share it with other entrepreneurs. We need the ideas out there. Now, in terms of getting hold of the book, a couple of easy ways. If you want to get hold of me, douglaskruger.com, simple as that. All of my episodes of From Amateur to Expert are there under one of the tabs, and there are some 400 episodes, each one with a little tip on how to be a top expert in your industry. The book itself is available from pretty much every source, although ironically not from bookstores at the moment. So what's happened is they have gone to print in nations where they can. In the nations where it has not been possible, it is available as an ebook and as an audiobook. So I personally read the audiobook. I would recommend going that route. You can go to audible.com, audiobooks.com, or applebooks.com and get it there. If you prefer the ebook, that would be easiest ways just to go to Amazon. In the next, hopefully the next sort of few weeks, maybe the next month, a Penguin will be allowed to do the print runs, and it will go to the bookstores. Weird thing, it's actually going to come out at the same time as a previously written book that was supposed to have been written this month, and that's titled Poverty Proof for Entrepreneurs. So basically both of those books, as soon as they can print, they will launch them both. Excuse me. But yes, ebook and audiobook, Amazon, Audible, and pretty much any other source. If you just Google it, it'll bring it up.
Awesome. And then I've been a subscriber to your newsletter that comes out every Monday, your Monday morning motivator email.
Yes.
Where can people sign up to that if they're interested?
Great stuff. Same story, douglaskruger.com, and go to the little newsletter sign up tab. And yeah, just drop your name into it and you will start receiving it every Monday.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and that's been very valuable. I've shared that with a lot of people, every now and then as there's something that comes out and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I would just forward that. So thank you very much for that. I just want to double check here if there is any questions before I say thank you.
Brian is making us. You mentioned that the newsletters and the videos, they are free to use. Yes. So, if you happen to have an e-zine or a podcast or anything like that, and if you would like to use one of the videos, you don't even have to ask. Go ahead and use it.
Oh, wow.
Just mention that it's me, or if it doesn't actually say so in the video, but you're totally free to use them.
No, that's amazing. Thank you, Douglas, for that. And also go check out his YouTube channel. You've got 83,400 subscribers at the moment.
Yeah,
I mean, there's that one video that where you were recorded giving this at it looks like the Linden Auditorium where you did it.
Yeah, it's and 2.5 million views. I mean, that blew my mind.
Amazing.
When I started this YouTube channel, it was really it was a fun thing for me to do as a speaker and a way of marketing myself. And it was toward the end of last year that video went viral on YouTube. I caught it at about some 400,000 views, and I was staggered by that. And as a result of that, I was able to monetize the channel. And since then, it's hit 2.5 million. It blows my mind.
Yeah, that's amazing.
A quick tip for anyone who wants to look at monetizing a channel: the requirement is 4,000 watched hours. So if you, for example, have a 1-hour video and 4,000 people watch it, that's job done. If you have 2-minute videos, you need a lot more views and so on. But once you hit that 4,000 watched hours, you can then apply for monetization and it can become an income stream. So just worth knowing.
Yes, and then you need that 1,000 subscribers. That is almost the hardest part of the job, is getting to 1,000 subscribers. So it's something that I'm actually checking, because we are now on, in the last 28 days, we've done just over 100,000 watched minutes, which Wonderful. Is, you need 240,000 watched minutes to get to the 4,000 hours, obviously. So I'm looking at the minutes because that's what I track. But then, it's that little needle moves very slowly in terms of the subscribers, but we're getting there.
Let me jump on over there and add one more to the mix. There you go.
Thank you very much, Douglas. Cool. All right, so Brian is saying, dress code, should we dress up even though we work from home? I feel it's a state of mind, feel and look good even though we work from home. And I think you're, like the way that you dressed this morning for this is obviously an indication that this is your job and this is what you do and this is your profession.
Well, Francois, you're assuming I'm wearing pants. I mean, I can neither confirm nor deny.
It was up to you to disclose that.
I've occasionally done a couple of videos with a stylist and business etiquette coach by the name of Janine Carly James. And I'd recommend her YouTube channel as well. She's very good. And born in the UK, lives in South Africa now. She talks about a thing called embodied cognition, which is to say we are not just a consciousness floating in a void. We relate to our bodies, our physicality, the way we dress. And indeed, it does make a difference. If you do dress up, it has a bearing and an impact on you. Now, I'll give you a sort of a slightly contrary advice, but just another good idea. I heard someone speaking yesterday about the idea of wearing gym clothes during the day, but for a strategic reason. And the point was, they had discovered that it was just too burdensome to go gym clothes, work clothes, gym clothes. And as a result of that, they weren't exercising. So they made the decision to start with the gym clothes in order to keep the exercise high. So that's not exactly an example of dressing smart, but it is an example of how your dress code affects what you do and how you think. So it does indeed make a difference.
Yeah. Douglas, thank you very, very much. I think it was amazing to be able to chat to you for an hour. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. And good luck. You've got a new book coming up that was approved and that you're going to be doing. So good luck with that, apart from the ones you've already written that will be published now. But there's a new one in the works as well. So good luck with all of that. And I hope to run into you somewhere again, even if it's at Scoops. I see you actually a lot at Clearwater Mall. We do pass each other quite often. Yeah. So
I'm generally sort of watching a little 3-year-old at the time. So if I don't notice you, please just say hi. But yeah,
I thought he was watching you, but okay. Cool stuff, Douglas. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. This was amazing and so valuable. So thank you very much. I wish you all the best, and let's keep touch and chat again.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.